We all know that in this F1 season, there wasn't a year-long battle for the title, as the technical rules for 2022 made the races closer, so drivers could sit behind other cars for longer, without losing as much speed as in previous years. But which race stood out the most? To answer that, we're going to be discussing the best races of this year, ranked by the fans. So sit back and relax. Starting off with number 12, Singapore Grand Prix. The track was wet, and there was a lot of spray in the first few laps, so this meant the drivers had to be extra careful. Ferrari's Sergio Perez got ahead of Leclerc at the start, which was the move that won the race. But it became a heavily timed race, as there were both real and fake safety car periods. And while Perez was driving away at the front, Hamilton and Verstappen both had accidents that made it harder for them to move up the order. Yes, it was entertaining, but not entertaining enough for the fans as it seemed, and that's why they rated this a 6.45. Up next, at number 11, we have the Australian Grand Prix. Like Singapore, this event got a boost from the fact that people were looking forward to it coming back to the schedule. It was typical of the first few races to see Leclerc and Verstappen fighting for the lead. George Russell was also in this fight, even though his Mercedes team wasn't usually near the front. But once Verstappen had to leave because of a problem with the fuel system, there wasn't much happening, and Leclerc won by more than 20 seconds. On top of that, Alex Albon's drive in an uncompetitive Williams to the 10th place was impressive, even though it didn't lead to any memorable moments in the race. And that's why the average rating by the fans is 6.49, followed by the Dutch Grand Prix at number 10. Even with banked corners and long DRS zones, it'll always be hard to pass on Zandvoort because it's so narrow and windy. But it's possible that the excitement of the Orange Army fans at their home track makes the race more fun because of the crazy atmosphere. The thing is, during the race, DRS-assisted passes were the norm, except for the first few laps when Magnussen crashed into the barriers, but somehow kept going. And the pit lane exit made for some nail-biting moments as drivers came out in front of each other and had to get through the narrow first section on cold tires without hitting each other. But most of the race's drama happened in the pit lane, and nobody was surprised when Verstappen won again at home, even though he had to pass Hamilton after a late restart. Because of the pit lane drama, the average rating for this race is 6.93. Not to mention, at number 9, we have the Canadian Grand Prix. During the Canadian Grand Prix, most of the passing happened during 2 virtual safety car periods and a longer period behind the real safety car. And this allowed Sainz to use newer tires to keep the race winner Verstappen on his toes at the end. On top of that, fans were really glad to see another Grand Prix come back after missing it a lot during the COVID-19 pandemic. Probably because of the longing, this race has a rating of 6.96 by the fans. Moving on to the Spanish Grand Prix at number 8. We think this one could have been the most ordinary race of the first half of the 2022 season, but that didn't mean it wasn't fun. We saw Magnussen colliding with a Mercedes early in the race and Sainz spinning out alongside Verstappen, making it harder to predict who would win. On top of that, Leclerc had a car problem that ended his chances of winning. In this case, a power unit failure. And as a result, Verstappen won as usual, with Perez letting him through twice. But what made this race stand out was that Russell fought Verstappen for the position more than once, and even passed him at one point to take the lead. But the difference in speed was clear when Russell came in third, almost 33 seconds behind the winner. And that's why the average rating for this race is 7.16. Now let's look at number 7, the Hungarian Grand Prix. We saw Russell getting his first pole position in his F1 career, but once again, he only managed to finish third. Mercedes was fast enough to compete with Red Bull for the win, and in the middle of all the DRS-assisted passes lower down the order, all three of the top teams were passing each other. Also, when Ferrari put Leclerc on hard tires, he was taken out of the fight for first place. And even though Verstappen had spun out in front of him, the Red Bull driver quickly got back in front of his rival. But despite Verstappen's spin not changing the fact that he won, it made this win stand out more than others. And the late fight between the Mercedes for second place added to the fun. And because of this exciting drama, fans rated this a 7.68. Up next at number 6, we have the Austrian Grand Prix. We think the last race of the season was a close one between Leclerc and Verstappen. It ended tensely because the other Ferrari's engine broke down, and Leclerc had trouble with his throttle in the last laps. Hamilton ended up fighting a Haas again, but Perez lost control of his car after making contact with Russell on the first lap. Later, he had to leave the race because of damage. That sucks. As for this one, fans rated it 7.81. Not to mention the Bahrain Grand Prix at number 5. Leclerc and Verstappen showed how they planned to fight for the championship right away in the first race of the season. And clearly, there was a lot of wheel-to-wheel action to start the year. We also saw Magnussen and Hamilton having the first of their two close moments. But we think if both Red Bulls hadn't had problems with their fuel systems in the last laps, there could have been a different kind of exciting finish than Verstappen and Perez giving up at the end of a tense race. And safe to say, this made people say, "Can you believe this is happening?" as the fight up front completely overshadowed the battles in the middle of the field this time. This race has a rating of 7.83 from fans, followed by the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix at number 4. When it was used for the first time in 2021, the Jeddah Corniche circuit showed it could host close races, and the second time it was used, more races were held there. Early on, when the two Alpines were fighting, they came close to colliding. Sainz and Perez, who won the pole position, were also too close to each other when Sainz left the pits, as the narrow track layout led to many similar moments across the grid. But what made the year's second race stand out was that Leclerc and Verstappen battled for the win until the end. After each overtook, the two drivers fought again, and Verstappen won by just over 0.5 seconds. Ocon and Lando Norris also fought for 6th, and that's why this race has an average rating of 7.93. Now for the United States Grand Prix at number 3. We remember Lance Stroll's Aston Martin being in third place early on. He and Alonso later crashed in a spectacular way. After a penalty put Leclerc outside of the top 10 at the start of the race, he made a pit stop behind the safety car, which helped him move up to the front. He then passed Perez for third, which was a great move. On the other hand, Verstappen had a slow pit stop, which kept Mercedes in the running for the win. In the last part of the race, he chased down Hamilton and passed him to win. Even though their fight on the track only lasted 3 turns, we could hear the crowd cheering the whole time we watched the race on TV. On top of that, Vettel also gave a lot of entertainment on the track as he briefly led the race and passed Magnussen on the last lap to move up to 8th place. At this race, the love between F1 and the USA was as strong as ever, and fans rated it an 8.04. Coming up next at number 2, Brazilian Grand Prix. The Brazilian Grand Prix was where Hamilton and Verstappen's rivalry began to heat up again. Mercedes got their only win of the year, while Magnussen's weekend went from being a hero on Friday to being a 0, and many of F1's biggest names drove hard from the back to the front. The Brazilian Grand Prix started with a crash between Ricciardo and Magnussen, which brought out the safety car early. After the restart, there was even more action when Hamilton and Verstappen tried to pass each other and crashed into each other. And then Leclerc and Norris also crashed into each other. This led Verstappen and Leclerc to fall to 17th and 18th place, but then they had great races and got back to 6th and 4th place respectively. But the end of Verstappen's race was even more exciting because he disobeyed his team's orders to let Perez pass, and everyone over the team radio could hear the argument that followed. Russell won the race with a nearly perfect drive, and the Brazilian fans were happy that Hamilton came in second. Fans rated this Mercedes win an 8.2. Last but not least, at number 1, we have the British Grand Prix. This race got more 10 out of 10 votes than any other, but it got off to a bad start when Zhou had a scary crash on the first lap that made the race stop. Zhou was lucky that he didn't get hurt, and when the race started again, it was a lot of fun. On the first lap, Verstappen and Leclerc were in a close race. Perez broke his front wing, and then pole winner Sainz passed Verstappen. But when the safety car period ended with 10 laps to go, Hamilton and Perez, the Ferrari men, were able to race for the win, wheel to wheel. Eventually, Sainz came out on top. Perez came in second, and Hamilton's third-place finish thrilled the crowd at home. But Verstappen had to work hard to beat Schumacher to 7th place further back. The fans rated Verstappen's bad day at the office an 8.97, which isn't bad at all. That's all for this video. What are some of your best races of the 2022 season? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content in the future. Thanks for watching. See you next time.